Okay, everybody, good morning and welcome to the ISO AS9100 webinar. This is Suzanne from the Pacific Northwest Defense Coalition, and this webinar is being presented today in cooperation between Impact Washington, PNDC, and OMEP. Couple quick housekeeping rules. We will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. Please feel free to type in your questions in the question box on your control panel throughout the webinar. This webinar will also be recorded. A copy of this recording will be sent to you afterwards via email. With us today, we have Monica Julian from PNDC, Kristen Kautz from Impact Washington, and Marcia Buser.
Good morning. This is Kristen Kautz. I'm here to introduce our presenter, Marcia Buser. Marcia has led numerous successful quality management system implementations in a wide variety of industries, including aerospace, medical devices, engineering firms, and contract manufacturers. She brings a pragmatic approach as a result of having worked in the front lines of production for many years. Marcia has over 30 years of diverse experience in quality assurance and continuous improvement. She assists manufacturing companies today in achieving registrations to ISO 9001, AS9100, and ISO 13485. She's known and appreciated by her clients for having a very down-to-earth and practical approach to achieving certifications in the most efficient and effective way. Marcia has held quality management positions in companies such as In Situ Precision Cast Parts and others throughout the Pacific Northwest. She's an ASQ certified manager of quality and organizational excellence, a certified quality auditor, a certified biomedical auditor, and a Plexus Epic ISO 9001 training system certified trainer. So welcome, Marcia, as a very, very qualified person to speak to you today. So the webinar goals, let's just talk about what we're here to do today. We are here to give a brief overview of ISO and AS9100 registration processes and to describe a grant-funded training program that your company may be able to participate in. Even if you're not sure about participating in the program, this webinar will be very informative. The Consortium training program is planned to help jumpstart companies who need or desire ISO or AS9100 certification and registration in order to continue to do or increase their ability to do business in their current markets or to enter new markets. The consortium is intended to save companies time and money and help them stay on track to be a success at achieving these registrations. Let's talk a little bit about the JIAC training opportunity. So this is a grant, a 5-county grant that was awarded in the Portland metro region to serve 5 counties: Multnomah, Clackamas, Washington, Clark, and Cowlitz. The grant opportunity, the main intent of the grant is to accelerate the growth and market opportunities for manufacturing companies in the metals and advanced materials industry. The training opportunity to help companies achieve quality registrations is in alignment with that intent. The pieces of the puzzles you see here are the key thrusts of the grant opportunity. We want to help companies assess their growth opportunity and then concentrate on seeking new markets, working on operations, finding new product development. All of it will equal accelerating their growth. In the next slide, you see the target manufacturers that we are looking to work with. The core competencies are off to the left, and the manufacturing processes are described. And the intent of the grant is to help the companies with all of the current markets and new market needs to help them grow and prosper. So basically, the ISO certification is part of that process, and I want to turn it over now to Monica Jeline, who's going to talk to us about the current context.
So having come from industry, I have seen the value of being certified, and having the certification in ISO or AS9100 shows customers or potential customers that you are a mature company, that you have a certain competency, and you know how to do what you do best. And it certainly is a great way to submit proposals in saying that you are certified. You have a greater chance of winning those proposals and thus growing your company. I know that in proposal evaluations, ISO certification and AS9100 is very important and part of the proposal evaluation process. So being certified is definitely important, and so that is my little piece of the pie. And now introducing Marcia, she's going to talk about the ISO certification. We'll get to the guts of the matter.
All right. Thank you, Monica and Kristen. And welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. These are the topics we're going to cover today. First of all, we'll identify the standards that we're talking about and who can register your company to those standards. Then we're going to look at some of the resource requirements to implement and maintain quality management systems, as well as what you need to have in place before your first registration audit. So this will give you a feel for the commitment involved. We'll also look at some of the cost factors to consider, because management also always wants to know how much is it going to cost us. So this will help you assess what it might cost before you make that commitment. Then we'll go over some helpful hints that will make your implementation easier and better, as well as look at some common pitfalls that that companies make when they implement a quality management system. Then we'll go over some more information on the Consortium Workshop series coming up. And lastly, we'll open it up to your questions and answer them to the best of our ability and time constraints. So the two standards we're talking about today are ISO 9001 and AS9100. So when I refer to the standard in this presentation, it's going to be one of these two standards. ISO 9001 is a generic quality management system standard, and it can apply to any type of organization. Traditionally, it's been used by manufacturing companies, but it can apply to any kind of business where there's customers and suppliers. It's been adopted by service organizations, educational organizations, and even the U.S. Postal Service has become ISO 9001 registered. AS9100 is specific for the aviation, space, and defense industry. There's also some other ISO 9001 based standards for other industries, such as automotive, medical devices, and telecommunications. However, we won't go into those specific ones today. They all have the same foundation as ISO 9001. AS9100 has all of the requirements of 9001 plus some additional ones aimed at ensuring the entire supply chain meets 100% on-time delivery and 100% on-quality products and services. So while we often refer to AS9100 as an aerospace standard, with the last revision, Revision C, it expanded the scope to include space and defense as well. So just a note, if you plan to get registered to AS9100, you will automatically be registered to ISO 9001, but not vice versa. If you do get registered to AS9100, you have the option of running products through either quality management system standard, depending on your customer requirements. So I've given you some information where you can purchase the standards. They are copyrighted, so if you're going to get registered, I recommend that you purchase a copy so you're not violating copyright law right off the bat. And if you are going to download a PDF, make sure you read the rules, because some of the organizations that sell the standards only allow you to print 1 or 2 copies, and some of them only allow you to read it electronically. So you need to decide that before you purchase the standard, what your needs are going to be. So who can register your company? There are organizations, third-party organizations called registrars or certifying bodies. And anybody can hang out their shingle and say they're a registrar. But there is an ISO standard that governs registrars called ISO 17021. And there is an accreditation body called the International Accreditation Forum that governs the process. Most nations have a signatory to the IAF, and in the United States it's represented by the American National Standards Institute. So along with the American Society for Quality, ANSI manages the National Accreditation Board for certification bodies or registrars. According to the ANAB website, they describe their mission to assess and accredit certification bodies that demonstrate competence to audit and certify organizations conforming to management system standards. And ANAB lists all of their accredited members on their website and lists what standards they're accredited to. So in the upcoming workshop series, we'll learn how to use the ANAB website as one of several tools to select a registrar to best meet your needs. So we're going to talk about some of the resource requirements. First of all, is management commitment. So obviously when you make the commitment to get ISO or AS9100 registered, there's a commitment that has to start with top management. And it is a quality management system standard. Management has to make the commitment to institute and support the effort, and this includes not just financial commitment. It's not a case where you can just hand over the project to a quality manager or to a consultant while the management team goes off about its usual business. The standard is very specific about what is required of top management, and this is the one section where there's no additional requirements in AS9100 versus 9001. So the aim of the requirements related to management commitment are all about meeting customer requirements and continual improvement of the company's processes. Section 5 of the standard outlines specific requirements for top management, and there has to be ongoing evidence that top management is involved in making decisions to support and continually improve through monitoring objectives, providing resources, and implementing improvements. So just to inject a little levity into an otherwise sometimes serious topic, ISO 9001 has provided fodder for a number of Dilbert cartoons over the years, and this is one I really like. Here's Dilbert getting ready to implement ISO 9000 certification, and he sends out a notice that each of you will create an insanely boring, poorly written document. I'll combine them into one big honkin' binder, and I'll send copies to all department heads for comment. They will treat it like a dead raccoon and route it to the first passerby. So unfortunately, over the years, I've seen a few implementations that resembled this Dilbert cartoon and kind of given the standard a bad reputation. So some of the internal resources that you'll need to consider as you implement the quality management system standard are listed here. Some of these you'll be doing already, and some of them may be new to your company. So most of the resources involve people capable of performing the tasks and implementing and maintaining the quality management system. These tasks can be performed by a number of people, or they can be done by the same person, and it really depends on the size of your company and the complexity of your business. So first of all is the document control function. This applies to things like your quality manual, procedures, and instructions. It can include product-specific documents such as drawings and assembly instructions and external documents like standards, as well as customer drawings and instructions. So you have to have a system to control those. The next is the calibration function. This applies to any equipment that you use to inspect or test products, as well as any equipment that you might use to monitor processes. So for example, if you have a process that's sensitive to temperature or pressure, those gauges need to be calibrated. The next is the corrective and preventive action function. So every individual and every organization makes mistakes. By having a formal way to address mistakes and identify and prevent mistakes from happening, we all make improvements and avoid making them over and over again. Internal audits are a way to have an objective set of eyes review how our processes are working effectively together. And if done correctly, internal audits are one of the best continual improvement tools available to the management team. Internal audits can be assigned to one person in the company, you can have a team of people, or you can outsource internal audits. One of the requirements is that the person auditing is not responsible for the process being audited. The next thing is you need to identify or appoint a management representative for the quality management system. This is one person who speaks for the system, and it doesn't really matter what the person's regular job title is. It could be a quality manager, it could be a president in a small company, or it could be an office manager, or they could even go by the title management representative. So it's really going to depend on the size and structure of your company. But whoever it is, that person needs to have the time to do what's required, and they need to have the authority to make sure the quality system is being effectively managed. The next function is supplier evaluation and monitoring. So one of the requirements of the standard is that the company selects critical suppliers on the basis of their ability to meet requirements. And once you use them, you need to monitor their performance to make sure they're still meeting them. So again, who does this and to what depth is going to depend on your own business. And as one might expect with AS9100, there's some more stringent requirements around this clause. Inspection and testing, which is something you probably do already. But how much and at what points and how it's documented is going to depend entirely on your type of business and what your customer requirements are. It's going to involve both trained people and usually inspection and test equipment, so relating back to the calibration function. And it may involve some software inspection and test equipment. So for the most part, customers just want you to deliver the right thing in the right way. So inspection and testing is just part of your feedback loop that ensures that you do that. The last function to consider is disposition of non-conforming product. So when you do inspect and test and you find something doesn't meet the requirements, you need to have a documented process to figure out what to do with it. And this decision can be made by one person or a team of people, and it may involve your customers as well, depending on what the contractual relationship is and the type of nonconformance. And again, AS9100 has a lot of additional requirements around this clause. So by the time you're ready to call in the registrar for your first registration audit, these are some of the things that you need to have in place besides doing all the functions that we talked about. First of all, you have to have a quality policy. which is your statement of how you're going to meet your customer requirements and continually improve. And you need to have quality objectives. So these are measurable objectives related to quality. The standard doesn't tell you how many objectives you need, but it is plural, so I always interpret that as more than one objective. So those could be things like on-time delivery, numbers of RMAs, supplier performance, but they have to be measurable. You have to have evidence that all the requirements of the standard are addressed, or you need to document the justification for excluding a requirement of the standard. So for example, if you're a contract manufacturer and don't design your own product, you can exclude the design and development clause of the standard. You have to have a quality manual, and this is where you would explain why you're excluding a section of the standard. And the manual also needs to include or reference your company quality system procedures. And this is where you lay out what your processes are and how they interact. The standard specifically requires 6 documented procedures, and then it says you need to identify what you need to do to run your business effectively to meet your customer requirements. So the 6 procedures that are specifically required are document control, control of quality records, control of non-conforming product, internal audits, corrective action, and preventive action. And finally, you need to maintain records that you're doing what you say you do. So records provide the objective evidence of that. And depending on the complexity of your business, the standard identifies between 14 and 20 types of records that you'll need to keep. So some of the specific types of records are management reviews, corrective and preventive actions, and internal audits. And sometimes people refer to these 3 processes as the 3 pillars of ISO, because if those are working effectively, your system is self-correcting. Top management is looking at your processes and getting feedback and making corrections. So you need to have sufficient records of management reviews and corrective and preventive actions to demonstrate that your process conforms to those requirements of the standard. You'll also need to have completed a full cycle of internal audits and have records of those. So some of the internal audit records that you'll need to show is a schedule that shows that your audits were planned, and then audit reports that shows that they were done, and then any corrective actions that resulted from the internal audits. You may also be asked to provide records to show how your internal auditors were qualified to perform the audit, since having qualified personnel is one of the requirements of the standard. So if you're going for AS9100, in addition to the 9001 requirements, about 80% of the requirements are the same, but there's 80 additional requirements and 18 amplifications in AS9100. If you purchase a copy of AS9100, it will have all of the text of ISO 9001, which is in just normal font. And all of the additional AS9100 requirements are in bold and italics. So it makes it really easy to pick out the additional requirements and applications. Just a word to the wise, if you're going to go through AS9100, you can assume that your auditor is going to key in on those additional requirements. So you want to make sure that you meet them. So let's talk about some additional requirements for AS9100, because there are some additional audit requirements as well. There's a standard called AS9101 that AS91 auditors are required to follow for their registration audits. And it has very specific forms and audit processes that are significantly more extensive than for ISO 9001. You're not required to comply directly with AS9100. However, your auditor is, so it's really helpful to know what he or she is going to be looking for before your first registration audit. One of the forms that your registrar will send you before your first audit is going to ask you to identify your quality management system processes. This does not mean that you send them all of your procedures. You may have 40 or 50 procedures. What that's referring to is your core business processes, such as contract review, manufacturing, design, and quality management processes. So you may be asked to do what's called a turtle diagram of these processes, which basically is just a process map that shows your inputs and outputs for the process. Some of the additional requirements that are in AS9100D is you'll be asked to show performance measures and trends for the previous 12 months. So this means metrics for things such as on-time delivery, non-conformances, RMAs, and other metrics that shows how your company is performing. So if you don't have 12 months of data, you probably should consider delaying your registration audit until you can show that. You need to show evidence of customer feedback, such as customer satisfaction and complaint summaries, customer reports, and scorecards. You'll be asked to list all your major aviation, space, and defense and other customers who require 9001 series standard compliance. And it includes how much business each customer represents and their specific quality management system requirements. And you'll need to show evidence that the AS9100 requirements are flowed down to your suppliers. So, you know, again, as you would expect with aerospace, the supply chain is really important and requires more stringent control. So this includes flowing down things that your aerospace customers give you, such as ITAR regulations and first article inspections. Now we're going to look at some of the cost factors to consider. Costs are going to be directly proportional to the size and complexity of your company. So we can't give you exact dollar numbers, but just provide you awareness of what the cost factors are. So first of all, there's the internal costs. We already discussed some of the functions that require people, and you'll also need some infrastructure. However, the infrastructure cost should really be minimal because you probably have things like software and internet connections to run your business. And most of those are sufficient to implement your quality management system processes. As far as consulting costs, that's totally up to each organization. This consortium is intended to give you a jump start with the guidance of a consultant. And then after the conclusion of the consortium training, each company can assess their needs for further help. Generally, unless you have employees who are experienced at implementing quality management systems, you can actually save time and have a better end product with a qualified consultant. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the mistakes companies make if they don't have an experienced hand guiding them. So finally, the cost of registration and ongoing maintenance of the certificate, which is probably the easiest fixed cost to identify once you get your quotes back from potential registrars. So we talked a little bit earlier about who can register your company to the standard. The registrars have tables that are provided by the IAF for 9001 and by the International Aerospace Quality Group for AS9100. And they're fairly tightly bound by those tables in terms of defining how many audit days your company is going to need based on employees. And when we have our class sections, we can actually look at those tables to give you a better estimate for your company. But for example, if you're going for ISO 9001 and you have 20 people in your company, the minimum number of audit days would be 3 according to the IAF table. And if you have 1,000 employees, it would be 13 audit days. AS9100 requires more audit days. So for 20 people, the minimum number of days would be 3.5. And if you have 1,000 employees, it would be 15 audit days. So some of the other factors that are going to influence how many days the registrar will quote you will include the number of locations where they have to audit, whether you do design of your own product versus being a contract manufacturer, and the complexity of your processes. So these total number of days are split up into what's called a Stage 1 and Stage 2 audit. So your auditor or auditors will end up coming to your company twice for the initial registration audit. Stage 1 is primarily a readiness review and to make sure there's no evident showstoppers. So an example of showstoppers might be you haven't done any management reviews or internal audits, or you haven't fully implemented a calibration process. Stage 2 is the full-blown registration audit where the auditor or auditors goes out and asked to see evidence of your system working. And based on the number of audit days, your registrar may recommend having more than one person there. So for example, if you're required to have 15 audit days, your registrar may suggest sending 3 auditors for 5 days. So you get it over with in a week instead of having one person there for 15 days. But there is some negotiation on that. So here's some helpful hints for trying to determine how much registration is going to cost you. All of the registrars do 3-year contracts, and they all break out their costs differently. So it's really difficult to compare them to each other unless you look at the final cost over the 3-year contract. Another factor is where are the auditors going to come from, because when they give you your quote, they'll just say plus travel cost or expenses. So obviously if your auditor is coming from across the country, the travel costs are going to be higher. If it's a local person, you're going to save money on travel costs. There's also ongoing surveillance audits, and you can decide if you want to do that every 6 months or once a year. It's the same number of days per year. It's up to you whether you break that up into 6-month increments or do it once a year. And your experience is going to depend mostly on the auditor that comes to your facility as opposed to the company that they're working for. Although continuing service from the registrar is important too. It can be really aggravating if you have a registrar who isn't responsive to your needs. It's helpful to interview other clients who've used that auditor, and sometimes you have the opportunity to interview the auditor themselves. So we'll get into a lot more depth about how to select a registrar and auditor in our workshop series. So here's some tips for successful implementation of the standard. First of all, keep in mind that the standard is not a procedure or not a manual itself. It's just a standard. Every requirement in the standard has a purpose, so you need to figure out how to comply, keeping in mind what makes sense to your business to achieve that purpose, and make it your own and meaningful. The next is to focus on effectiveness and efficiency. So effectiveness is defined as the capacity to produce the desired result or have an intended or expected effect. It's really important to understand the purpose behind each requirement in the context of your business so you can assess whether it's effective. the term effectiveness appears 24 times in ISO 9001. So this is a really important concept in implementing your quality management system. And of course, you want to be efficient while you're being effective. And efficient means you're achieving the results with the minimum amount of resources. So this is one reason that implementing lean is very compatible with an effective quality management system. Last tip for success is to involve and listen to your internal auditors. You can think of top management as the captain of a large ocean liner who's looking at the big picture and steering your company through upcoming risks and opportunities out there. The internal auditors are looking what's happening inside the boiler room and the galley of that ship. So they're going to provide you really valuable insights for course correcting your organization. So conversely, there's some common pitfalls that we've observed in how companies approach implementing a quality management system. First of all is believing that you can buy a software system that does it for you. There's a lot of software packages out there that claim to be plug and play. I copied a claim here from one that somebody recently asked me about. I went to their website and I saw that they claim to cut out 95% of the ISO work involved. Well, if you believe that, I think we have a bridge to sell you. And for sure, there's some good software packages out there. However, the infrastructure that you already have in place to run your business, such as Microsoft Office, is usually sufficient to get you started. And if you have a SharePoint system or internet, those are great tools too. The company still needs to do all the work, regardless of what the software packages claim to do for you. There's no real substitute for understanding the requirements of the standards and having a champion who champion in your organization who implements those processes. So pretty much all the experts agree that you should implement your quality management system first and then investigate if there are tools that can help you manage particular processes. Otherwise, you're going to be expending money and energy setting up these systems and trying to figure out a system without really understanding what the requirements are and putting them in place. Some of the other common mistakes we see is that companies think they need to have a procedure for every clause of the standard. And they believe that the more volume there is in the procedure, the better. This goes back to the Dilbert cartoon of the big old honkin' binder. So the result is you have these massive documents that nobody understands and they don't get used and they quickly get out of date. I've been shown a lot of procedures that just cause my eyes to glaze over. No wonder ISO 9001 gets a bad reputation. So ironically, while going overboard on writing procedures, many organizations at the same time miss addressing some of the requirements of the standard. And this is especially the case with AS9100 with all its additional requirements. So it doesn't mean that you need a procedure for each requirement. However, you do need to understand what the requirement means and how to meet it in the context of your own business. Previously, I cautioned you about the pitfalls of using CAN programs. Most of the CAN programs we've seen just paraphrase the standard and leave a blank for you to insert your company name. So this goes back to the helpful hint to realize the standard is just that. It's your system and processes that need to comply, not just parroting the standard. A lot of experienced auditors will immediately recognize a procedure or quality manual that just paraphrases the standard instead of describing how your organization actually does something. And when they see that, then they'll start to pick at your process and figure out what you're trying to achieve. So now we're going to go into the plan for the upcoming consortium workshops. and this is a schedule. If you're interested in signing up for these, you'll get an email with this webinar with the dates, and Kristen's going to give you some more information on the workshops. First of all, there's an optional half-day question and answer session on April 23rd, and this is for company leaders and designated trainees to make sure that you're ready to make the commitment. We'll look at specific examples of quality documents, and we can talk about your company specifically and help you get a better feel for what's involved. Then we'll actually start the hands-on workshop on May 7th. In this first workshop, we'll do an introduction to process mapping, and we'll develop 2 of the 6 required documented procedures and related forms for them. So that's control of quality documents and control of quality records. In that first workshop, we'll do a project plan for your implementation with a timeline and milestones, and we'll draft a request for quote that you can send out to registrars and look at how to compare the cost. In the second workshop on May 21st, we'll develop 2 more procedures, one for corrective and preventive action, and this will include training material for those. And we'll look at tools and training material for your first management review and subsequent management reviews. The third workshop on June 4th, we're going to develop procedures for the remaining 6 documented procedures, and that would be control of non-conforming product and internal auditing. And we'll also look at forms and tools to help you manage your internal audit program and select suitable people to do those internal audits. There'll be a 4th workshop, and the date will be determined by the class participants, but we expect it to be approximately 4 weeks after the June 4th workshop. And we'll look at what you've done so far, review requirements that you still need to fulfill. If needed, we can work on a calibration procedure together, and then look at specific sections of ISO 9001 and AS9100 that are relevant to your organization and determine who the process owners are and what the approach should be. So now I'm going to turn it over to Kristen to describe the requirements to participate in the workshop.
Okay, so first let us say that this is a partnership with PNDC and OMEP and Impact Washington, and it is our intent that not only this workshop, which is grant funded, is held, but this is a model we want to pursue for the future. And so I guess my first thing to say is, should you not be a qualified company for this effort, don't despair. There are other things that we can put together to help you as well. So I have a lot of background with grant-funded training programs, and I can tell you there's good news and there's bad news. So here's the good news. If you are a qualified company, it will be free for you to participate in this training, and that is very good news because like we said, we're trying to jumpstart your efforts, and this will give you a good foundation and a good start on your way to the registration process. The bad news is there are always strings, and the strings are qualifications and paperwork types of things. So first, let's talk about your participation for this webinar, or sorry, consortium training project will be if you are in a qualified metals and an advanced materials sector of manufacturing. And so that's like Tier 1, you need to be part of that larger group that the JIAC grant is trying to address. Second, it is certain employees in your company who can participate and others who cannot. And these qualifications are a number of job descriptions, and I will provide those for you. Generally speaking, most of the management would be qualified to participate. Anyone that's in operations in a management or supervisory level can. Engineers can. So it's more who is excluded rather than who is included that we would need to talk about. And then the third thing that we feel very strongly about, and that's why we're having that half-day session, is we need to know that there really is a commitment on part of top management and the company to pursue the registration. It's very important for the goals of the grant that this isn't just informative for you, but that you are actually on the path toward registration. So we'll be looking to talk to you a great deal about what that commitment looks like and making sure that you're there on board with that commitment. The last things are there is a workforce data system that will require your company and you to give quite a bit of information about yourselves, and I will talk you through all of that and hold your hand through all of that. And the final thing where I would say it's not entirely a free lunch when the training is free is that we will require that the employer document in-kind match, which means those people who participate in the training, the value of their time in terms of their wages will be documented. And that can include the value of their time as they do their homework or preparation on the quality system. So we will be looking to pick up some paperwork from you in a number of ways, but I give you my word that I'm an old hand at it, and I will make it as painless as I possibly can for you in pursuing this grant opportunity. We are going to take some questions now, and after that I'll give you a little bit more information about what your next steps are.
All right, thank you everyone. So feel free to use your control panel in your questions box to type in a question. We have one question. How long is the training?
So the workshop series is 4 days. There's a half-day optional workshop, which is more just to answer your questions before we get started.
I would say it's highly encouraged to come to the half-day session because there is a paperwork phase that it would be nice to get it all done on that half-day as well. But if you can't make it, we can make accommodations for you on that.
Great. Okay, second question. What is the location for the training?
I'm scheduling rooms. It'll be in this building, so co-located with PNDC's office here in Clackamas.
Harmony Center.
Right. In Clackamas, Harmony Center building, it's near the Clackamas Town Center area, also near the North Aquatic Center here. So.
Yeah, we share a parking lot with the Aquatic Center, so that should help everyone there.
Yep. So do we have any other questions?
The next slide is Kristen's information. If anyone has questions, they can contact her.
So here's Kristen's information. She's from Impact Washington. Her email and her phone number are listed there. So if you have any questions, then we can...
and especially on do we qualify, I'm happy to work with them on that and any other information. So those of you that are listening and sharing this, if you intend to go forward, we would love to hear from you right away so that we can make sure that we get you all the possible answers to your questions.
Right. We have another question about a copy of the slides. I, Suzanne Lamb from PNDC, will be emailing all the attendees a PDF file of the presentation. Also, when we get the recording settled and up, we will send you a link to this recorded webinar so that if you need to review it again, you can play it or distribute it to another employee in your organization if needed.
I think for PNDC members also, I would like to ask them to direct questions to either myself, Monica, or Suzanne Lamb regarding PNDC member eligibility for the training, because that is separate. And so if you guys have any questions regarding PNDC membership and the advantages for you, just contact us here at PNDC.
Absolutely. Well, another question we have, what is the range of costs for the registrar and auditor for a small business of 10 employees?
So the auditor costs can range anywhere from $1,200 to $1,600 a day. The AS9100 auditors get paid a little more because there's a lot more training involved. And it will depend on the number of audit days. And I would have to look at the IAF table. In my example, for 20 people, it was 3 days. Would probably not be less than 2 days. So that's for your initial registration. There's also other fees. And like I said, all the registrars break out their costs differently. Some have documentation fees. If you're going for AS9100, you have to pay $500 to get registered in a database. And then there'll be the cost for your ongoing surveillance audit. Is that sufficient?
Can you give a general ballpark for a company that size, like total cost,
I
think is what they're asking.
Oh, probably $13,000 to $18,000 over 3 years, and most of the costs will be in the first year.
And feel free to follow up, with us if you have more questions or you want to dive into any of these issues a little bit more. Any other questions? Well, if anybody has any questions, well, you have our contact information. Again, we will be sending this out to you via email. And then we look forward to having everybody at the next training session. And I guess that's it. Thank you again for attending, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thank you.